So, as usual, we'll talk on the Parsha of the week, based on the Sikha from Rebbe, and winding it down to something of pertinence and importance for ourselves. This Parsha, Parshas Pinchass, as you all know, begins by telling us that Pinchass was granted the status of a Kohen. He was not a Kohen before, even though he was Aaron's grandson. You learned this in the Rashi, right? But he was not really a Kohen. And here, because of what he did in the affair with Zimri and Solu and the Midyanis, because he set himself out with Mesiras Nefesh, he merited to get that special status of being a Kohen. Now, the Rebbe points out that Kohen is not merely a kind of a privilege or an opportunity. If a person becomes a scholar, he learns, if he learns, he becomes a scholar, and then he gets smicha, he becomes a rov, and he has the right to pass mishayos as a result of his effort. A Kohen is not something that you can obtain by your effort. Just like you cannot become somebody's offspring by any effort. Either you're his son or you're not his son. A Kohen is a natural state of a Kohen. Hashem had given Aaron a certain quality, and that quality is naturally imbued into the Kohanim and all his offspring. And there's absolutely no way to obtain that quality by any kind of effort, any kind of human effort. One time, I recall there was a young boy, a Kohen, and he was going to marry someone that a Kohen is not permitted to marry. And if he should marry that person, then he loses his privileges, his status as a Kohen. He was not really religious, but nevertheless, he came, some people met him and they started talking to him, whatever it is, and finally brought him to 70. This was in a time, much earlier time, when access to the Rebbe was much more easily obtained. So he actually had an audience with the Rebbe. And among the things that the Rebbe said to him was that, look, I have been studying all my life, and I've acquired enormous amount of scholarly knowledge. The Rebbe talks about himself, and he enumerated various things that he is perfectly well familiar with. And I can get any scholarly title, so to speak, but I cannot become a Kohen. You were granted that status, and you, by this act, are going to forfeit that status. That's what the Rebbe said.
He said, I envy you, right? Is that the same story, or was there another story where it was some guy going to marry a guy?
Well, I don't remember hearing that the Rebbe said, I envy you. But this is how the Rebbe, so to speak, described to him what he has and what he's forfeiting.
So I think it's another story. There's a different story also where someone thinks the Rebbe was going to marry a guy. Also, and he said he looked. This guy even to like all different rabbis at the time. And then basically the Rebbe looked at him for a little bit, and all the rabbis yelled at this guy, like, "You sure gonna know what you're doing?" And he said, "I envy you." And the guy was like, "What?" Same.
Why do you envy me? Right? I envy you because you have a real challenge, and as a result of this challenge, you're going to have a great accomplishment. Yeah. Okay, so therefore, when we say that Pinchass was granted the status of a Kohen as a result of some action, it begs an explanation. What actually? How can any action create that status? So then the Rebbe goes into quite a lengthy discussion of what Pinchass has done. Essentially the act of Mesiras Nefesh. Pinchass stood up in a very compromising situation.
I was just having a compromising situation. I like the characterization.
And he went and so to speak, stuck his neck out on his own, and he was really a youthful person. He was not the Moshe Rabbeinu, he was not Aaron, and there was Moshe, and there was Eliezer, there were his father, and he stood out on his own. He went out and he did this thing. And so this was enormous Mesiras Nefesh. And the Rebbe discusses a little bit deeper the significance of the type of Mesiras Nefesh, or the strength that Pinchass has exhibited in that act. And that was that, in effect, this particular situation that Pinchass had observed and that he stood up against did not demand that he go out on his way and do it. Did you learn the Rashi? Rashi said, brings it down, that somebody who marries a goyke, there is no law that can punish him. What Pinchass has done was a voluntary retribution, a voluntary act on his part. And this voluntary act was motivated in Pinchass exclusively to save the honor of heaven. Because this was a very terrible insult. Huh? A godly honor. Kovit Shemayim. That would be a Chilul Hashem. To go and do this in such public manner, that was a terrible Chilul Hashem. And Pinchass was fired up, so to speak, in anger for such a Chilul Hashem, for such a blasphemy. And therefore he stood up and he did it. And that is the only circumstance where this is permitted. Because as I said, by law, he was not, there is no law that would punish him. There's no prescribed punishment for this act, and there's certainly not death. But kanoi, someone who is taking up specifically, who is deeply affected and touched by dishonor to a godly name, he has to do it, and if he does it on his own. As a matter of fact, if he goes to the Beis Din and consults, should I do it? They would not tell him to do it. There's something that you can do only on your own.
You have to kill them both at the same time also, right?
Yeah, what?
Would they say not to do it?
Imagine you didn't kill them
they would not tell him to do it. That was, they would not stand behind him. They would not tell him not to do it, because he has the right to do it on his own.
It's not considered an Avirah with no punishment?
I'm sorry?
So it's not considered to be an Avirah, just that it has no punishment?
Or it is something Avirah. Repeat your question again, please.
Isn't the act considered an Avirah just without any punishment?
Yes, definitely it's something there.
And yet the Beit would not...
But there was no prescribed punishment. Bezdin cannot punish for such an act.
Even in front of 10 men?
What?
But isn't there some halacha?
Right, even in front of them. This is not that type of a thing. Okay. So this is what's called kanoim poigemia. Kanoim means someone who takes up specifically the honor of heaven. And this is what bothers him. Not the consequence of the act or anything like that.
Special guy, right, who done this?
What? Pinchass.
Huh?
Pinchass.
Pinchass kills this guy who also was...
He was a Nasi. He was a head of the tribe. You see, Besov, he was a
But
Nasi.
this time was so common and nobody even paid attention to this. It's not a big deal, you know.
What?
This type it was so common. Between
Wait,
the people,
what are you talking about?
whatever what he's done, Pinchass, okay, kills the guy. That kills the people who live in this area was so common. It's nothing was...
Which area?
whatever Pinchass kills this priest.
Yeah, no.
Okay?
Yeah.
People above somebody, tribe or something. It was so common this time for the people who live
I
in
don't
this
follow. You
area.
mean this time now or then?
No, this time.
Everybody was upset.
Yeah, but it's nothing was special. You know,
No, it was very special. Everybody was upset.
I don't know how the priest could do this if he knew this was going to happen, you know, he's going to be killed.
He didn't know that he was going to be killed. Everybody was upset. There was a big upheaval. Okay.
And they still yelled at Pinchass, though. People were still like making fun of Pinchass and saying,
Well, in
"You think
some
you're zealot."
there was such afterwards there was such an accusation of Pinchass and so forth. Then okay, so in final analysis, the Mesiras Nefesh of Pinchass was called the Mesiras Nefesh of the purest kind. What does that mean, the purest kind? Sometimes the person is told that he should do a certain Avera, or being Oived Avodah Zarah, and he is Moser Nefesh. He's Moser Nefesh because he does not want to be an Oived Avodah Zarah. There's a personal loss as a result of that act. Or whatever other Mesiras Nefesh, there are all kinds of different circumstances of Mesiras Nefesh. In this instance, there was no demand upon him to do it. This was called Rishus. There was no demand for him to do it. No obligation whatsoever. And when he went to do it, it was exclusively because he was deeply touched for this honor of Hashem's name. This is called a kanos.
Why is it called that it was Mesiras Nefesh on his part?
What?
Was he putting himself in risk by doing
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because if he doesn't kill them both at the same time, he's Chayav Misa.
Well, it's not only that. It's not only that. That he could have watched and see if it happens in the proper way. He went right in the middle of Shevet Shimon, and he was a Nasi there. How was they going to sit by and let him go right through?
Forgive me, why does he have to do both, or else?
That's the second thing. He's carrying a spear. Clearly, what he is intending to do, and all his. But what happened? Okay, let's go back slightly. I don't want to miss the point. The Shevet Shimon, what happened was that there was a lot of transgression over there with Pe'er and all that. And Shevet Shimon was heavily involved in that whole fiasco. And Moshe Rabbeinu then instructed all the Shoftim to punish all those who transgressed, who were able to pray. And therefore, from Shevet Shimon, there were many people who were being punished or being killed because they were able to Avidas prayer. So then they went to Deir Nossi, to Zimri, and they said, look, we are being so treated, and you're doing nothing to save us. So he got up, and he wanted to make a point by bringing this Midyanis with him, which was a terrible, insult.
What point would that make in relation to the Avodah Zarah?
That the point was, you think they're doing wrong? How about you? Because they challenged Moshe Rabbeinu. Doing wrong is not so wrong. That's essentially the point. And he put himself out to this. So therefore, his tribesmen were there, for behind him. They were definitely on his side, because he put himself out for their sake. And now Pinchass is coming with a spear behind him into the tent, which obviously what he intends to do, and they'll let him just go through. And when he comes out and they are hanging on their spear, what happened was he was carrying them throughout the whole camp, and nobody's touched him. What? A strong guy. There was one of the Nisim that happened. Not only he was strong, but the spear itself didn't crack. Okay. And we have no idea. They may have been, 300 pounders. I have no idea.
These anyways, they're at least probably 300 pounds to combine.
The whole thing of Weight Watchers is a modern idea. I mean, those days there was no such thing. Okay. All right. So this is called what the Rebbe explained. This is what's called a pure Mesiras Nefesh. A Mesiras Nefesh that is not done from the perspective, I'm doing the right thing, I'm doing correct thing. Mesiras Nefesh where he's not concerned whether he's doing the correct or nothing. He's concerned exclusively making a point that he is standing in honor of Hashem's name. That was the Mesiras Nefesh. Now, in this very same parsha, I'm just going to certain points from the Sikha, and then we'll bring it back to us. In this very same parsha of Pinchass, it's followed then by counting the Yid, and then it follows by Hashem instructing Moshe that who are going to be the people who are going to inherit Eretz Yisrael. When they take over Eretz Yisrael, how is Eretz Yisrael going to be divided? It can be divided amongst these people that were counted in Parshas Pinchass. The Gemara also says, Pinchass ze Eliyahu. Eliyahu Hanovi is going to come and foretell the Geula. The Gemara says that Pinchass and Eliyahu is the same person. Because by Pinchass it says that he was Kanoi, Kinu Hashem Tzvokis. By Eliyahu it says also the same words, Kanoi Kineisi Hashem, that the Pinchass Eliyahu.
I'm sorry, what were those words again, please?
And then he was a Kanoi, Kanoi Kineisi Hashem. In other words, Pinchass, just as the Pasha speaks about entering Eretz Yisrael, Pinchass is also the one who is foretelling the re-entering Israel and the final redemption. Is Eliyahu.
Which Gemara is it?
I'll have to look it up. Now, the Geula, the future Geula, the Gemara says that the Geula will come as a result of even doing tshuva. Tshuva. And the Rebbe,
Even to doing tshuva, like it says even.
no, it's a necessity. It's a necessary part of preparing for the Geula. Tshuva, the Rebbe explains in this sikha that tshuva is not merely the point that they will get forgiven for their sins, and because they're forgiven for their sins, therefore they're married to have the Geula. But there's another aspect. The union in tshuva as related to the Geula is that tshuva is part of the Geula itself. It's not just a cause, but it's part of the Geula itself. There's a direct relationship between tshuva and the Geula. And what does this mean, a direct relationship between tshuva and the Geula? The koiches hanefesh, the human being, there are different levels in the person. This we discussed at many instances. Generally speaking, a person, there's five names of the neshama: nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, and then there is yechida. I'm sure you all heard of these 5 names. The difference between the various names of the neshama. There are great differences between each level. Nefesh and ruach and neshama, they're all different. And chaya is in a category by itself. And then there's a fifth category, this is yechida, which is altogether in a different category. What is that? What is the significance of these different categories? Just as we are observing in a person, this is the crux which I want to discuss. In a person there are functioning qualities, abilities to act. For instance, he can walk. Walking consists of moving one's legs, feet, one in front of the other. Now think about this. We have robots today that also can walk by moving one foot in front of the other. In other words, this ability to walk is such a low level of the neshama that this action itself can actually be duplicated in a robot that has no neshama at all. By a human being, it is a neshama. There's no question about it. It's part of his life, a koyach hanefesh. But it's a koyach hanefesh that is of such a low spiritual level that it becomes part of the body, even to the extent that it can actually be duplicated in a non-living entity. Today, we have even the ability to create voice sounds, speech, synthetic speech, which means that even speech, even though speech clearly is a much higher capability in a person than walking, but nevertheless that too is a part of the nefesh that can lower itself to the level where it becomes a part of acts on the bodily level, as if it were body, because the robot also can do it. There is a big difference between a human being speaking and a robot speaking. Big difference in a human being walking and a robot walking. But despite this difference, these are koiches are called koiches, active koiches, functioning koiches. which means that you have very little cognizance, recognition that this is a living, a neshama element.
What is it? What koich is? What's it called?
Functioning, it's called pnimim. Koiches that are become imbued in the body. It's called mislabesh in the guf.
You said we have less of a recognition that what?
That there is a living soul behind it. The life element of the soul. You don't see it. It becomes completely part of the body. The three levels of nefesh, ruach, and neshama are all three levels of nefesh, ruach, and neshama are in full cooperation with the body. They express themselves completely through the body. Then there is, and this actually corresponds to the three worlds, Asiya, Bria, and Yitzir, and Asiya, Yitzir, and Bria. Then there is a fourth world, it's called Atzilus, and that already refers to the fourth nefesh, level of the nefesh that's called Chaya. Now, Chaya is also functions through the body, but this is in a different way. And I want to just elaborate very briefly. There are koiches, there are functioning koiches in the human being that, as I said, that function through various parts of the body, like the hands, the feet, the mouth, the nose, the eyes, and so forth. Then there is what's called koiches makifim. Functioning koiches that function, but they do not function to any particular part of the person, very particular element in the body, like the will. Rotzek, the will is not something that expresses itself in one part of the body or another. The will is something that's felt everywhere, in the entire body equally. That is, so to speak, higher than being contained in the body as part of the body. And actually the will enlivens and picks up and gives strength to the entire body equally. All of these levels together do not facilitate, do not enable a person to go on Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh means, let's analyze it briefly. Mesiras Nefesh means this, that normally a person senses his nefesh through his body. I'm alive. How do I know that I have a nefesh? Because I'm alive and I can function, I can speak, I can do things. Mesiras Nefesh means that he is giving all of this up. If he's giving up, so what is he left with? What makes it possible for him to give it all up? The only way that this is made possible is because he has a certain aspect of his nefesh, a level of his nefesh, that is not determined by its function in the body, which means it is super body. It is something that he senses that is not body dependent. Even if you were to dissociate the nefesh from the body, the nefesh will continue to live. Nefesh is not body dependent. Speech is body dependent. Walking is body dependent. Thinking is body dependent. But there is an element in the nefesh, when the nefesh is cognizant of Hashem and so forth, maybe we'll discuss that, that is not body dependent. This is something which the nefesh has totally independently on its own. And this is where Mesiras Nefesh comes from. Like when Pinchass went out and he put himself out in this situation where there is no obvious justification for him doing it, in, so to speak, in the worldly context. It doesn't say any place that you should do that. And if you ask a rabbi, he would say, I don't know, he doesn't say any place that you should do that. And he goes and does it. On what basis? Because he perceives something of as I said, of pure Mesiras Nefesh, means something that's higher than what can be defined in the world. There's no worldly way of putting it down and saying, okay, this is the right thing to do. The only way it is perceived to be done is only if you recognize Hashem in a manner that is world independent, above world. Perceiving Hashem in a manner that is above world. Which means in simple terms, I want to simplify this. It means in simple terms like this. Normally when we think of Hashem, our first and primary substantiation in the reason for saying it is Hashem is because we see a world. We see a world, therefore we know there is Hashem. But really, the Neshama knows Hashem not by seeing the world, but by seeing Hashem directly. Purely, without any worldly experience. This is what we mentioned many times, and the Rambam says, you should probably know it by heart. And the Rambam says right in the beginning, that Yisoid HaYisoidesh Amud HaChochmas, that what is the foundation of all foundations, and what is the pillar of wisdom, is to know that there is a first being. To know there is a first being. And this first being is the source for all other creatures. This first being is the source for all other creatures. How can you know of a first being before there is creatures? How can this be the foundation of wisdom? Foundation of wisdom means what? That before you have wisdom, you know this. How do you know this without wisdom? You follow my question? This is the foundation of wisdom, which means that this is what creates wisdom. So how do you get to know this without wisdom? Excuse me? But it means that there is an awareness, there is a part of the neshama that is above wisdom. Wisdom is something which we understand through insight, through learning, through thinking. This is something which we know. This is something which we know because of what the neshama knows, independent of wisdom, independent of study, independent of thought. And that is the first knowledge that a person has, the primary knowledge. And this enables all wisdom. All wisdom is based on this knowledge. I want to briefly complete the Sikha and then come back to us. So then, the Rebbe explains in the Sikha that what happens when there is the recognition of this higher level of the neshama, that higher level of the neshama ultimately has an effect on the lower levels of the neshama also. So that what happens is that a person's thinking and action are also imbued with this higher, with the effect of this higher level of the neshama. And this is ultimately what is going to be in the Geula Shlema, in the fullest redemption, that the highest level of the neshama will be revealed in all levels, even on the lowest on the functioning level. So obviously this requires much more elaboration, but as I said, I want to bring us down to ourselves. And here's the point which I want to bring out. We spoke about this many times. As mentioned today, that certain actions, a certain level of actions that we do can be duplicated in robots that do not have a soul at all, do not have a life at all. We human beings, we were privileged. We were given a neshama. And this thing that we were given a neshama means that even the smallest thing that we do, even such things that a robot can do, we must bring into this a neshama quality. We must sense its neshama sense, value, meaning. It's not enough for us to do it on a superficial level. Let me elaborate.
So this is Mesiras Nefesh, you're saying?
Right, the Mesiras Nefesh represents cognizance of the highest and so I want to bring it down, the concrete thing, because I want that we should be able to actually follow through on this. We have spoken about this many times. 1 and 1 is 2. But this 1 and 1 is 2 is something which can be taught to a computer. Okay? And the computer can figure out arithmetic and mathematical equations much faster and more accurately than a human being. Are we then going to say that a computer has anything akin to a human being? Akin means similar to a human being. Any opinion about this?
Only the processing power, but no level of soul. It doesn't have any creativity.
That's totally different thing.
And maybe some storage and recall that's similar. That's what I can think of as an analogy.
We perceive as two parts, but the computer only perceives one part. Right? Like 2 is one entity.
Right. And I want to elaborate on this. When the computer says 1 and 1 is 2, the computer is not saying that there are 2. It says that there are 2 ones. 1 and 1 essentially is 1 and 1. That doesn't change. They don't change, they don't become 2. 1 and 1 is 1 and 1. Because each one stands independently of the other, separately. Except he says, how many ones do you have? So you can't say up says, oh, you have 2 ones. Because he is counting the external, the physical entities. 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay, how many ones do you have? I have 2 ones. The human being has a completely different perception of what's going on. The human being, please understand, he looks at it and says, there's 1 and there's 1. What allows for this one and this one to be? What allows for these 2 to be? Now, we can view it in 2 different ways. We can view it, each one, please listen carefully, okay? Actually, let me take a broader picture, okay? The evolutionary theory, the evolutionists who say that the human being evolved from a monkey. Well, I don't know if you're familiar with this, I just want to say this, the stupidity of it all. The evolutionary thought is that how did the human being develop from a monkey? Because a monkey is not able to make tools, not able to protect itself, not able to do various things. It would be vulnerable, be dangerous. So therefore they slowly developed the means to protect themselves. And eventually they developed the level of a human being. A human being can make an airplane and he can really protect himself. This whole thing is all from the perspective of self-protection, of security. This is the power that enabled everything, all development. That's the theory. Now let's project this. There are 5 billion human beings in the world, 7 billion. Presumably, each one of these 7 billion human beings developed the idea of being a human being for the same reason. But they developed it independently of each other. In other words, every monkey developed independently of the other monkey to become a human being. Right? Because each one did it for his own reasons. There is no unity between them. Do you follow what I'm saying? Each one did it for its own reason. What was the reason? To protect itself. So this monkey is protecting itself, this monkey is protecting itself, this monkey is protecting itself. So they are all independent human beings. And they're all different species. This one developed independently of this one developed independently of this one. So there is no such a unified entity called a human being. Because each one created himself to be a human being. For different reasons. This is the way the world would perceive things. If you have one and you have another one, each one of these ones is present because it's present on its own, not because there's some kind of a unified reason why they're there. So there's no 2, there's 1 and 1. We see it from a completely different perspective. We see that this is all the Meibusher's creation. So if there are 2 people, it's the Meibusher created 2 people. It's the same source, and therefore there is a real union between them. In other words, even though we're talking about a low level, 1 and 1 is 2. But this perception of 2 already reaches up to a neshama level. Because that in your neshama you know that everything comes from Hashem. Nothing created itself. Therefore you see it from that perspective. Therefore you see that they're related to each other. That they are 2. If you see it, a computer doesn't have a neshama. Computer sees it only on the on the physical level. So by the computer, it remains always 1, 1, 1, 1, because there was no relationship between them. You with me?
I'm not sure I really follow. I understand you're saying
Okay.
1, 1, 1, 1, but all human beings you're saying are more than just one.
One second. 1, 1, 1, 1. You understand?
Oh, yeah, that part, yeah.
Okay. So therefore, you understand that essentially 1, 1, 1, 1. There is no correlationship between them.
They have nothing to do with each other.
Nothing to do with each other. And if you count up 10, there are 10 ones. It's not a unit of 10. Why? Because each one of these units essentially is responsible for its own presence. It's there because of itself. It brought itself to be.
As opposed to people.
No, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
People also, from the worldly perspective, it's the same thing. Each person made himself be.
One is descended from another one also. Genetics.
Okay, if they're descendant, but ultimately, let's say there is a lineage, right? There has to have been more than one monkey that decided to become a human being.
Not necessarily with respect. I'm reluctant to argue with my rabbi. But if I may say one thing,
Sure.
you get to a point, a population bottleneck, where one eliminates a great number of others, rivals as it were,
Mm-hmm.
and then mates with the females, and he passes on his genes,
Okay.
which are not carbon copies of himself.
What I'm asking is a very simple thing. The monkeys decided that you have to make progress and become a human being. Was there only one monkey that made that decision?
I respectfully suggest that it wasn't a decision made by him, rather environmental conditions, maybe a virus of theories that they dropped out of the trees.
Whatever it is. Was did that affect one monkey only?
No,
Did it affect many?
Everyone that he passed his genes on to, I imagine.
Okay, did it affect many monkeys?
It would have to, sure.
Okay, if it affected many monkeys, so each one of these affected monkeys would eventually develop into human beings, totally unrelated to one another.
Sharing a great deal of DNA and therefore proteins and therefore...
They may share, but in terms of becoming a human being, each one becomes a human being independent of the other. This is why, in today's mentality, they come up and they say, look, you have this nature, you think like this. This person thinks the opposite. You say, but it's a perversion, it's not normal, it's not human. No, for him this is normal. Every human being developed independently. This is exactly what they're saying, one on one. There is no correlationship. What is this mentality? They're human beings that have a perverted way of life. So you say, hey, this is not human. He says, why not? They develop like this, they develop like this. They evolve this way, they evolve this way. That is when you look at the world without a neshama, without life. Look at the world from exclusively on the physical level. And everything occurred on the physical development level. This is why we're saying that when a human being, when we have intelligence, when we see things, even when we see physical things, we see physical things from a much higher perspective. That there is a spiritual reality to this. If there is two, so there are physically two individuals, and actually on a higher level there is a relationship between them, and they're united together. There is a similarity. This is why when we call 10 people together, we say now is a new world. We have 10 people, we have a minyan. 9 people is not a minyan, 10 people is a minyan. What's the difference? There are 10 ones. 10 people form a whole unit of a minyan. That we can do things with 10 people that you cannot do with 9. Why? Because we're looking at it from a higher perspective, from a neshama perspective, from a godly perspective. This is an important principle in our thinking. It's an important principle in Torah. Like we mentioned many times, the Torah says, "Lo yisig." You must not steal. So there is a world interpretation of that prohibition. What is the world interpretation of not stealing?
It's immoral.
Why is it immoral? Essentially because you're interfering with somebody else's life. And if you steal, then he will steal from you, and then the whole society will fall apart. The whole reason is all, so to speak, right here on the surface. Don't steal. If you want to live in peace in your own home, don't steal from his home, because then your home will also be violated. There is not, so to speak, a principal truth to it. Let me explain what I mean by a principal truth. The principal truth is that this is his not merely because he grabbed it and it became his. This is his because God had decreed that it is his. God gave it to him. And if you go and you take it from him, you're violating a godly reality. That is why Lo yisig, for instance, don't steal, and Onoichi Hashem Elokecha, which means I am your God, are both part of the Aseres Adibos. You would think that they're two different worlds. Onoichi Hashem Elokecha is to believe in God, to know that there is a God. Lo yisig, that's a social rule. A civil law. How is it compared to Onoichi Hashem Elokecha? The answer is?
I know.
Huh?
I was going to say maybe because he's establishing that I'm the God and I'm the one telling you what to do, and I'm, keep my word basically, and don't steal if you believe in God, and that's the.
Yeah, but why? What is the correlationship? In other words, this is not a godly element. Why should God mix into this? It should, in the Goyish world, not the seven mitzvahs Ne'meach. There's also one of the mitzvahs is that they should establish rules, but the rules you can establish according to their own will. They should get together and say, how do we want to rule our society, and we establish rules. As long as they have rules. And they follow them, then they fulfill their obligation. Here we have a completely different thing. We have actual rules, specifics. Do this, don't do this, even on the civil law level.
Maybe because all the assurs that they were also chayav misa, because Lo yisig is really kidnapping, and if you kidnap one of Hashem's creatures, you're taking away his life essentially, and therefore, because Hashem is the one decreeing that you should.
Well, you're not necessarily taking away his life. Even kidnapping is not taking away a life. The point in there is that when Lo yisig, Lo sachmoy, for instance, do not desire. These are things. The violation there is not a violation, even though it's called benodom l'chaveri. It's an interhuman violation. But every interhuman violation is actually a violation against God. That's the point.
Big or small.
Excuse me?
I'm saying whether it seems like a big thing or small.
Not big or small. It's always a violation against God. This is the important thing. To recognize this, you need an neshama. There's no way you can recognize this on the surface level. You cannot explain that to a robot. No way. Or to a computer. There's no way. Only a human being is able to understand this. And it is important to understand that whatever we learn, simple or profound has a neshama quality to it. As I pointed out, even one-on-one has also a neshama quality, because the concept of two is based deep down in the human thought. It's based on the fact that they both were God's creations. They all come from the same source. Do I have you with me at all?
When you say both come from God, the same creation, you're talking about two people?
Two people or two apples?
I'm not trying to be difficult. I don't see what Hashem, if he exists, has anything.
Huh?
I don't see what Hashem, assuming Hashem, has anything to do with these things in our framework that we're talking about. I don't see where it necessarily comes in. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm not trying to be difficult.
All right, no, fine. I'm glad. That's exactly what I want to challenge. Okay. Okay. Before I go on, I just want to say this. We are talking about something which is, so to speak, a neshama quality that can only be explained to another human being. It cannot be explained to a non-human being, which means that we can only communicate at the level where if I make a point, you understand it on your own. There's no way I can actually present it to you. Because anything I can present, I can present to the computer. But this is not something I can present. I can only awaken your thinking and say, oh yeah, deep down I see that point. In other words, it's not something I can present. I can only, so to speak, make you think, and then you would find it in yourself, in your own. The only way to awaken a person, to present to him an idea that cannot be presented, or awaken him that he should recognize the idea, is by showing contrast. I just want to ask you a very simple question. Again, going back. Do you think that when a human being says 1 and 1 is 2, and when a computer says 1 and 1 is 2, they are saying the identical thing?
Can't be.
Excuse me?
It can't be.
It cannot be. What's the difference? That's exactly what we're talking about. What's exactly what we're talking about? What's the difference?
You're asking what's the difference between our concept of two and its concept of two? I don't understand programming. I never did much with it.
No, I'm not talking about programming. I'm not asking how the computer knows. I'm asking, what does a computer relate to? What does it mean to the computer at 1 and 1 is 2? And what does it mean to a human being at 1 and 1 is 2? Please understand my question. I'm not asking how the computer knows. Neither am I asking how the human being knows. I'm asking, what does it mean? What is the message? Is there a difference in the message? That's what I'm asking.
There must be, but I don't know qualitatively what it would be.
Okay, but you sense that there is a difference.
Because we created it to...
You sense that there is a message. There's a difference. Okay. That sense is an extremely important sense. That's what I want you to understand. That sense is an extremely important sense. This is your human sense. This is the sense that the computer will never get. And this is the sense that we hope that we all develop here in Yeshiva. We learn Torah. To sense that which only the human neshama knows, not that which you can just lay out on a physical platform. 1 and 1 is 2 is very easy. Here's 1 and 1. Count them. 1, here 2. That's how the computer knows. That's not how we know. To us, this is a reality. There's a relationship. There's a unity between things.
And that's similar to like what we were learning yesterday, like with Moshe and his nevuah, and any chacham in general who looks at something and says like, who sees like the function of it, or a human who sees the function of
the
it.
reality. Yeah, I don't want to confuse that. That is the point which I want to to impress over here.
Qualitative difference.
Whether you know what the difference is or not, at this point, it's important, but not necessarily. Sometimes, most of us will not be able to really identify it. All I want is that you should recognize that you personally sense that there is a difference. And I want to impress upon you that this sense is more important than the fact that you know that one is two. This is more important than the actual knowledge of the answer to the question. This is the sensitivity that we want to bring out by learning Torah in general and by learning Chassidus in particular. You learned in the first perek of Tanya that a Yid has two neshamas, a nefesh olekis, a nefesh abahamis, a godly soul and an animal soul. Please, how can you say that a human being is an animal? Animal soul. What do you mean an animal soul? Look how smart he is. Look what he's able to do. He's able to fly to the moon. You call him an animal? This sensitivity which we point out before, this is what you have to bring in to play over here to understand this statement.
Human versus computer and not human versus animal, in other words?
No. I said the sensitivity I pointed out before, that's the sensitivity, that's the neshama insight that will allow you to understand how it is possible to call a human being an animal. Nefesh Abam it's a human being, human soul. He is smart. He's very smart. And it's called an animalistic soul. You learn it right in the first perek of Tanya. Did you ever understand it? It makes sense to you?
Not really, no.
Not really. Okay. That's what we're here for. To understand this. Not just to know the answer, but to understand this. To bring out and reveal the difference between the animal and the human being, and to bring out in us the human quality. That's what this is all about. It is possible to learn and to become scholarly, become very knowledgeable, and remain an animal.
Yeah.
By true definition. A smart animal. And this is where today's world goes berserk. Animals are so smart. I think you say animals don't have sheikhul. Look how smart they are. And we insist there is no such thing as sheikhul in an animal. It doesn't exist. Why not? What's the difference? Look how smart they are. And what is the purpose of us understanding this difference? The purpose is to understand what we are, not what animals are, what we are. When do we employ our seichel? When do we become human beings? That's the important thing. They won't let you graduate from here until you have a sense of the difference between a human being and an animal.
All right. The question about how Pinchass.
I'm sorry, just throwing that in clouds. I could live with that. I like this place.
Okay, yeah.
The question from the beginning.